Well, hello, and welcome to our lecture on Chapter 6, where we'll discuss stimulants here in PBH 435. Our goals for this series of mini lectures are to discuss the history of cocaine and amphetamine use and how those rates of use are related, and then also to explain some historical concerns about the selective racial impact of how sentencing guidelines are different for users of crack and powdered cocaine. We'll also talk about the dependence potential of cocaine and amphetamines, and then we'll compare acute and chronic toxicity concerns between cocaine and amphetamines, those two sets of drugs. So we'll start by talking a little more generally about stimulants. Stimulants are, it's a category that most people are pretty familiar with, that idea of a drug that can help to raise your energy level, keep you going both mentally and physically. And we do have two different categories of these. We've got restricted ones, ones that are either on a prescription basis or sometimes illicit, and our big examples here are cocaine and amphetamines. And then we also have ones that are readily available. We've got legal stimulants, including caffeine and nicotine. So in this lecture today, we're going to focus on the restricted stimulants, and we'll be doing separate lectures on both caffeine and nicotine later in the semester. We're going to start with cocaine, and we'll be talking about the history of cocaine. So basically this started with the leaves of the coca bush. Civilizations in the area have been harvesting and cultivating coca leaves for over 800 years. And as a part of the culture of the area, it played an important role in both religious ceremonies and then also as part of currency and trade. And basically the role of the coca leaf is that someone who chews it, who uses it, will get a low level of that stimulant effect from coke that we identify with cocaine, and it will help to reduce fatigue and increase productivity, just that general stimulant feeling of an upper. So this started with use in the area, and then the role of the coca leaf became more important over time. So we see the use of cocaine spreading from South America into Europe by the 19th century. And of course this was legal use. The European countries did not have any bans on the use of cocaine, and it was actually promoted as a beverage. There was a coca wine that was very popular, developed by an individual named Angelo Mariani, and he actually got an endorsement from the current Pope. So this idea of using the extract from the coca leaf to deliver that stimulant effect was widely accepted. And we saw it used not just in beverages or in the leaf form, but we also saw that extract added to many other products, including the lozenges and tea. And then here in the United States, we saw the same thing. We see our cocaine tooth drops. Imagine that would be very helpful with pain. May have some other side effects though. So we see the that cocaine extract in use in the United States as well. And the urban legend is true. The early versions of Coca-Cola did include some of that cocaine extract. So one important thing to realize when we talk about that and other uses of cocaine extract at the time is that it was much less pure than the levels of cocaine that we're used to discussing now. And we'll see this process in place as we talk about many of the drugs that we'll talk about here this semester. We'll see the drug occurring naturally, like cocaine on the leaf of the coca bush, and then people acquiring it directly from that format, where chewing the leaf of the coca bush does not have the intense effects that powdered cocaine does. We'll see distribution of the product get wider, and then we'll also see the manufacturing process make the substance more and more pure, which magnifies the side effects over and over and over again. So we start with the coca leaf, then we see cocaine extract being used in widely acceptable products, and then we'll see the product being distilled more and more until we end up in the area of dangerous side effects. So when we talk about how that substance was isolated from the plant, we see this happening before 1860. So this was happening, we talked about cultural trends early in the semester, it happened during the time period of the industrial age, greater interest in scientific processes, and we see the process being put in place to extract the cocaine from those coca leaves. It did take quite a bit, 500 kilograms of coca leaves to yield just 1 kilogram of cocaine. But this was actually
developed for medical uses. There's a Dr. Halstead who was using this who developed the use of cocaine as a local anesthetic. And he's actually known, he's a prominent physician in American history, known as the father of modern surgery. So this was an important tool at the time, and it certainly didn't have the negative connotation that we see here in the modern era. We also saw some early psychiatric uses for cocaine, and again from prominent members of the medical community. Originally, Sigmund Freud actually promoted the use of cocaine for treating depression and also treating morphine dependence and the withdrawal symptoms that would come with that. But when he observed a friend of his who was going through morphine withdrawal, experienced cocaine psychosis as part of that, he did later change his mind. So we do see, again, this history of cocaine being having legitimate medical uses during different historical periods. But we did start to see a change in the legal approach to the use of cocaine. And we've talked about this a couple of times so far in class, and we're really going to start to dig into this idea of racially motivated laws. So what we saw with cocaine was these widespread news stories during that age of yellow journalism, when we saw for the first time people trying to create dramatic news headlines that would sell papers. And some of these stories were unsubstantiated claims about cocaine use among Southern African Americans. And if you think about the historical trends of the time, this is also the post-Civil War era, when there's a lot of cultural influences, a lot of cultural events that were related to racial tensions. And this was just another aspect of that. So what newspapers were reporting at the time was that cocaine was in widespread use among African Americans, and that those African Americans who were using it were more likely to commit violent crimes. And we saw a legal response to that. 46 states passing laws to regulate cocaine in that 30-year period from 1887 to 1914. But if we look back at legal records from the time, it really does not support the perception that this increase in violent crime was attributable to cocaine, and specifically to African Americans on cocaine. So we'll see this trend of not being able to make the fact of being a minority illegal, but it is possible to make a behavior associated with being a minority illegal. We'll talk about this several times. We'll talk about it with marijuana and opium as well. So a lot of the negative publicity that was generated about cocaine for lots of different reasons ended up in this final passage of the federal legislation, the 1914 Harrison Act. So when we talk about forms of cocaine, moving on from history into different ways that cocaine is consumed, we'll talk about four major categories. The first one is coca paste, and this was really the first form that was developed after people just pulled the leaves off of the coca bush and chewed on it. They create this paste, and it's still created as part of the manufacture of cocaine, and we have seen we've seen over time that paste is sometimes mixed with tobacco and smoked, particularly in South America. It's not something we see in common use here in the United States. The form of cocaine that we see portrayed in the media primarily is cocaine hydrochloride. So this is the purest form, the most common form of pure cocaine, and this is a stable water-soluble form, and this is often snorted, that inhaled through the nose method of administration. So our third form of cocaine use is freebasing, and this is when the cocaine base is not extracted before, but it's extracted during use with a solvent, which is then the two substances are heated and the vapors are inhaled. And then finally our fourth form, crack cocaine. Some street names for crack: biscuits, boost, gravel, rock star, moon rocks, lots of words that refer to the actual appearance of crack cocaine, which is created when cocaine base is mixed with water and baking soda. Cocaine is mixed with water and baking soda, and then those lumps are created. And then once again, the crack cocaine is heated, and then the vapors are inhaled. So these are the basic forms of cocaine, these four: coca paste, cocaine hydrochloride, freebase, and crack cocaine. And now we'll talk a little bit more about the contemporary legal situation for cocaine. Basically, we saw an increase in cocaine use here in the United States in the late 1960s. Before 1985, really the only form that people in the United States were using, or the primary form that people were using, was cocaine hydrochloride, that powdered form, most often snorted. And it was usually sold in large amounts that were relatively expensive. So because of this connection to the cost, this use of cocaine was associated with people of privilege, status, wealth, and then we also saw cocaine use among celebrities and famous people. So if you think about that idea of how cocaine use in the 80s is portrayed, we tend to see powdered cocaine in that setting consumed by people with wealth and power. Now, in the mid-1980s, we see this change. We see this change in processing that makes crack become more available. And this is an inexpensive product. At the time, it was about $5 to $10 for a hit. And the use of cocaine in this particular matter was not associated with wealthy stockbrokers and movie stars anymore. Now it was associated with poor Black Americans. So when we look at the history of the contemporary legal situation, it's important that we trace it back to that change in the cost and form. So we saw a lot of media coverage of crack use. Of course, this is the exact same drug as cocaine, but we're not seeing that media coverage about the horrors of cocaine use. We see it really focused on crack use among urban Black Americans. And we see, again, that association with violent crime that's not necessarily supported by the facts. And again, we see legal response. We see the Anti-Drug Abuse Acts of 1986 and 1988. And this is the first time where we start to see the penalties for the different forms become significantly different. So for the sale of crack cocaine, the penalties would be significantly more severe than for powdered cocaine. And we also saw tougher penalties for users. So as these acts became law and their effects became felt in society, we started to see some concerns about this. The U.S. Sentencing Commission, as you read about in the text, had raised this concern that the severity of the penalties disproportionately impacted African Americans, and it really exaggerated the relative harmfulness of crack, which was the form most likely to be consumed in that population. So as we move forward through time, what we end up seeing from 92 through 2006 in the chart on this slide is that we really see disparate, not just enforcement, but disparate sentencing. So if we look at the racial characteristics of different types of cocaine offenders, either powder cocaine or crack cocaine, we really see disproportionate enforcement among the African American community. So we'll wrap up the first part of our lecture here, and then we'll be digging into the mechanism of action for cocaine in our next session.